Now, this video is actually going to be a quick follow-up to my discussion video from last weekend about what, if anything, Disney should do with the prequels. And if you didn't happen to catch that video, I'll include a link to it in the description below, though it certainly isn't required viewing for this video. And before I get into it, let me first say thank you to all of those who watched and commented because, once again, there were a ton of great responses, and I got back to as many of you as I possibly could, but certainly couldn't respond to all of you. Still, I did read all of them, and I can say that, pretty much overwhelmingly, people did not want to see any changes made to the prequels, and that they should be left as is. And this is exactly the sentiments of our top two commenters, with Samar saying, "Leave it the way it is, but start the Clone Wars again. I want that show to finish." And Kimmy Skywalker, who said, "Please do not touch the prequels. I love them as they are, and nothing Lucas made himself should ever be touched by anyone but Lucas." And I do basically agree with both those comments, because the movies should never be altered, and George Lucas's version of the prequels are very much a part of his legacy. And to touch on what Sam R said about the Clone Wars, as much as I would love to see that show make a return, and I know that fans have even created a petition demanding that very thing, I just don't see that ever happening. Which is a shame because I would have loved to have seen the Clone Wars get a proper ending, because, and I think most agree, it did a phenomenal job of adding depth to the prequels and answering many of the questions the movies left us with. To put it simply, it made the prequels better. And that's something I'm all for, which is why I made the suggestion in last week's video about a special edition of the prequels in the form of 3 books that went more into depth with the story and helped explain some of the events that were happening that really never got explained. Because, as Sultan Ahmed so perfectly put it, the story or cake is there when it comes to the prequels, it's just the frosting that was put on rather sloppily. And that's really how I feel about the prequels and Episode 2 in particular, which I think is the movie with the most muddled and confusing story of the 3, because I do think there is a great story underneath it all, but the execution in telling that story is where the failing is. Or perhaps it's just the fact that there isn't enough time to tell such a huge story in 3 2-hour and 15-minute movies, which is why I liked the idea of the special edition books that could slow the story down and give it the time it needs. But that wasn't an idea many seemed to be in favor of, though a lot of people did only express their desire to never see the movies themselves reworked in any way, shape, or form, and didn't give much of an opinion on my book idea, which I'll take to mean most people just wouldn't have much interest in reading them even if they did exist. However, what really surprised me about the responses is how few people actually just outright bashed the prequels and thought they were completely irredeemable. And don't get me wrong here, there were certainly comments from those who hate them and either want them removed from the canon or remade. But I do wonder, and many brought this up as well, are the prequels not as hated as a lot of us think they are, or has that hatred perhaps died down a bit as the years have gone by? Or maybe the responses to one video aren't anywhere near a large enough sample size to make such a final judgment. Honestly though, and this is more just a gut feeling than anything else, I don't think the prequels are as hated as much as most believe. Now, that's not to say they're perfect movies and those who don't like them are unjustified in their beliefs, but I think there's just this myth out there that most older fans, those who grew up with the original trilogy, just hate the prequels, and I don't know that's actually the case. And sure, maybe older fans are more prone to dislike them, or be more critical of them, or just heavily favor the original trilogy because we grew up with it and it has a special place in our hearts. But I do get the sense that most Star Wars fans enjoy the prequels at least on some level, and a lot of those who don't enjoy them at all at least have learned to accept them. And that those who hate them are just always going to hate them, even if my silly idea of making books to help them out ever came to pass, or if they started making anthology movies in the time period that also helped the story out. Because really, the story the prequels told shouldn't have needed any help. They should be able to stand on their own. And even though it's too late to do anything about the movies themselves, because I agree with those of you who think the movies should never be touched, I'd still be for more stories set in the prequel time period that make us all say, well, that makes so much more sense now, in regards to things that happened in the movies that maybe didn't get the best explanation, or maybe even none at all. And yes, the Clone Wars animated series did a great job of that already, but I for one still think there's room for more stories that offer a greater expansion and understanding of this time period. Well, that's all I've got for you this time. Now it's your turn to tell me what you think. Do a lot of people hate the prequels still? Or maybe has that hatred died down over time? Or has it always just been a vocal minority? Let me know in the comments below, and let's talk some Star Wars. And also, let me know what you thought of this follow-up video, and if it's something you'd like to see more of in the future, especially with my weekly discussion videos. And speaking of that, I will have a new one of those up tomorrow, but until then, thanks for watching.